It was not looking good for the party. The group had traveled all the way from Sigil, the city of doors, to the beastlands, a feral and dangerous plain to deal with a corrupt tree in the middle of a vast forest. After days of travel, hiding from numerous groups of predators and gigantic beasts, they finally made it to their destination. A corrupted maze of sharp brambles and neon green bipedal monsters armed with spears and skin as strong as bark, the group pushed forth until they met their final trial. A group of mutated creatures had drunk from the great tree here and were using it for their own means, corrupting it in the process. The party fought valiantly, but round after round, more of the party went down, exhausted and on their last leg. The elven sorceress Isanel decided to call to her patron, the Three Fates, for their aid, as she cast animal summoning. The Three Fates answered, the ground beneath their feet started to shake, a deep cacophonous growling came from beyond, and soon, help arrived. Through the single entrance into this area, hundreds of lions poured through, tearing the evil creatures apart and leaving none alive. The party, both relieved and surprised, released the captives in the cages, cleansed the tree of its corruption, and rode the gigantic lion pride back to the gate, leading them home. This is just one story of many that I have from playing Dungeon Crawl Classics. Welcome! I'm Wasabi, and today I'm going to break down and explain my favorite tabletop RPG and why you should play it. It's by no means a perfect system, but if you like chaos, rulings before rules, and completely unbalanced play, Dungeon Crawl Classics may be for you. Dungeon Crawl Classics, or DCC, created by WasabiBurger Games, is a fantasy tabletop RPG that is based off of the D20 system. Though its system and mechanics are based off of more modern D&D, its tone and style of play is heavily influenced by D&D from the 80s. DCC is not concerned with balanced encounters, having to fight goblins before you can fight dragons, or character sheets that are 2 to 3 pages long. It's all about good old-fashioned adventuring, dungeon delving, and crazy moments happening from lucky and especially unlucky dice rolls. I'll be sharing some of my personal stories and the stories of my players near the end of the video, but for now, let's dig into the review. So the first thing you'll notice when flipping through the book is the abundance of art, but also the complete diversity of it. Some of the art is amazing, and some of it looks like comic art from a newspaper. There honestly isn't that much to say about the art, as I really think you either love it or you don't. It does a really great job of conveying the tone that DCC is going for. Though a lot of it is really lighthearted, other pieces capture the gritty deadliness that is a big part of the DCC experience. Depending on how you like to run it, DCC can have some serious tone whiplash between one scene being really goofy and gross to the next being grim and serious, and I think the variety of the different art pieces really reflects that. As I said before, it's really going to be something you love or you don't, so I thought I'd showcase some of my favorite pieces to give an idea of what's in the book. So here's this great piece.
Mechanic. No. It could be a concubine.
No. Here's a wizard showing his favorite mug to his god. Here's a picture of me writing the script while my imposter syndrome stands behind me. And here's an orc having an existential crisis. There's a lot more great stuff in here, such as these pieces. Now, the DCC book is a chunky boy for sure, but it's not nearly as intimidating as it appears. Most of this book is art and tables, and then WasabiBurger Games decided they should probably squeeze some rules in there. If only the rules were left, the book would probably be a third of the size. As for the layout of those rules, I think it's overall serviceable. For a game that isn't about having a designated rules lawyer on hand to check the book for the correct answer, it completely works. I will, however, say on several occasions where my group has looked for a rule or table, it hasn't always been as quick and easy as I would have liked. However, Jeremy Darham created a reference booklet which you can find on the WasabiBurger Games store, and I have found it immensely helpful. It contains all the tables in the game, and it's an invaluable resource for any DCC group. So I was originally going to break down the layout of the book and go through it section by section, but I realized while doing that this video is more about being a quick video to see if this is a game for you and your group, so I'm trying to keep it as short and as interesting as possible. I might do a more detailed video on the core book itself in the future if there is enough interest. So, I won't be doing a super deep dive of the rules in this video, as that's not really the focus, but I will be doing a quick overview of the different ways to play. There are 2 tiers of play in DCC. The first is 0 level play, where you play in what is called a funnel. I think the best description I can think of for funnels is that they are basically deadly peasant game shows. Each player gets a handful of different level zeros and runs them through a dungeon. Any surviving level zeros gets to level up and get a proper class. Each level 0 has an occupation that determines what gear they have, because with level 0 play, there is a massive emphasis on creativity. So sure, you have a handful of people with terrible stats and no good weapons, and once their hit points reach 0, their life is snuffed out forever. But on the flip side, you have a good amount of gear when all your fodder is put together. And because you have several little peasants to sacrifice, it causes you to experiment and combine your gear in clever ways and take risks, or sometimes even just throw them headfirst into a trap to disarm it. Now you might be thinking, several characters per player sounds like a lot of work, but the DCC sheets don't have a lot on them, and it's all just generating RAM stats anyway. But even better, you can just go to purplesorcerer.com and just generate as many level 0s as you need and print them. Level 0 is an absolute blast to play, and I have found it to be a perfect way to bring new people into the hobby. It's extremely rules light, lends itself easily to comedic and memorable moments, and is the epitome of beer and pretzels gaming. If you have any interest in running a funnel, I recommend starting with the one in the core book, Portal Under the Stars by Joseph Goodman, or Sanctum of the Snail by Joshua L.H. Burnett. And if going through a dungeon designed to slaughter as many of your adorable little peasants as possible while they work together to survive doesn't sound like a fun time to you, I honestly don't know if we can be friends. Leveled play is a completely different game. It's unfortunate most people I have met who knew very little of DCC thought the funnels were the only aspect of the game, because it couldn't be further from the truth. Now, I absolutely love funnels, but level play is the best part of DCC, hands down. In the core book, there are 7 classes: Cleric, Thief, Warrior, Wizard, Elf, Halfling, and Dwarf. You can find many more classes in other publications, both first and third party, but we'll just cover these 7 for now. All classes start at level 1 and go to level 10, and they all have their own quirks, which we'll go through quickly. Clerics. So clerics are divine spellcasters who can heal and turn unholy, so not all that different from the cleric classes in other games, other than how they work mechanically. The biggest difference is that clerics in DCC have to serve petty asshole deities who will deny you aid randomly. This class is easily the crunchiest of all the core book classes. I do not recommend it for the first time, as they have quite a bit more to them. I barely ever have them in my games and opt for DCC Lightmore healing most of the time, or giving players healing items. They are by no means complicated by the standards of something like D&D 5e, but they feel clunky compared to the rest of the classes. I will explain the magic system when we get to the wizards, but the quick and dirty for these guys is that their gods grant them spells and powers, but when you roll really low, you have a chance to make them real mad. Thieves. Thieves are ridiculously good. Thieves can do everything you'd expect from sneaking, lockpicking, backstabbing, and all that. What truly separates them from any other thief, rogue in other games is due to their exclusive luck mechanic. So, all characters, including level 0s, have a luck attribute. They can burn that attribute permanently, 1 for 1, to increase their rolls. So, if you're trying to attack the knight and you need a 16 to hit their armor class, but you only rolled a 14, you can burn 2 of your luck to make the hit. The trade-off being that the lower the luck, the more difficult passing luck checks can be, and those can be very important. Anyway, with the thief, when they burn a luck, instead of a 1 for 1 though, it's a luck die that they roll, and the die goes up on the dice chain every level. So at level 1 you're rolling a d3 for every luck point, but at level 7 you're rolling d10s. On top of this, thieves get their level in luck points back each day, and that's why I absolutely love them. They are the epitome of unbalanced at higher levels, and you cannot have a bad time being unstoppably lucky. Every thief who has ever been at my table has had a blast backstabbing a mook and automatically performing a critical hit on them. I highly recommend playing as a thief. Warriors. Warriors are probably my favorite class, but there isn't a lot to say about them. They are your classic fighter barbarian type, and they have a very special mechanic to make them effective and fun to play. The warriors have a mighty deed die. It goes up on the dice chain every level, just like the thief's luck die. The die is added to both the attack and damage, but what makes it special is that it's a bit of like a badass moment die. You describe what you want to do, and if you roll a 3 or higher, your mighty deed goes off. There is an actual list of things you can do for mechanical benefits, but the way I play it is just have the player playing the warrior get creative. So, it could be swinging from a chandelier and kicking over a skeleton, shoving a guard out of a window, or stabbing the Cyclops in the eye to blind them. This is by far the simplest class, and I highly recommend it for new players who don't want to think too hard about mechanics and just want to get creative in combat. Wizards. Now, wizards in DCC are one hell of a time. I was going to cover magic in a separate section, but I think it's better to explain the magic system here. So magic is absolutely chaotic and unpredictable. Spellcasting is powerful but very dangerous for not just the spellcaster, but everyone in the surrounding area. Spells are stronger the higher your roll is. Wizards and elves, before they can cast, can declare they want to spell burn. This works similar to the luck mechanic, except the caster burns from their physical attributes of strength, agility, and endurance, and they get 1 attribute point back per day after a full day of no spell burning. This can really help bump up an otherwise mediocre spellcasting. I once had a player cast Enlarge on the warrior, and they spellburned about 10 points, and then they rolled a natural 20. They were hoping to just beef up the warrior, but instead they turned the warrior into an 80-foot colossus who scooped up the party and bypassed half the dungeon just by walking over it to the end and absolutely wiping the final boss. It's a game I will never forget. I'll tell more DCC stories near the end of the video. Now, that small anecdote might make it seem like wizards are broken, and they are, but on the flip side, it's very possible to fumble or roll so terribly that bad things happen, such as corruptions changing your physical form, the spell misfiring and killing a party member, or losing control of a demon. There is a bit more to magic, such as mercurial magic and ritual casting and a few other things, but that's a topic for a different time. On top of this, the wizard can have supernatural patrons that both grant them extra spells and can cause great anguish if they're defied. The wizards are pretty simple in my opinion. They have a bit more to them than warriors, but I would say they are on the same level as thieves for complexity. If you love chaos and want to really shake things up, this is the class for you. So for the next 3 classes, I'm going to be doing a bit of a lightning round. We have the dwarf, halfling, and elf. I don't often use these classes unless I'm running a D&D-like game, such as my monthly DCC Planescape game for one of my groups, or a Tolkien-like game. This is mostly because I prefer humanocentric worlds when it comes to the darker fantasy games I like to run. However, I use them all the time for one-shots. So first is the dwarf. They are a variant warrior with a deed die and a special shield bash. They can also smell gold and see in the dark. Very fun class if you like the warrior but want a different flavor. Halflings are most similar to thieves, except they have some differences. The most important one being able to give luck to others, and also for every point they spend, it counts as double. Halflings have the same broken charm that the thieves have, but I personally consider them the weaker of the two. Comment if you disagree. And finally, elves, which are variant wizards. The elves can cast spells, must have a patron, but also have a bit more health and slightly more martial prowess. All 3 classes are great, and I consider them to be as good as the thief, wizard, and warrior, but they may not always fit the tone you're going for. So already, you can see how leveled play is very different from level 0 play. You replace dozens of pitchforks and torches for a handful of swords and spells. One thing to keep in mind as well if you are considering trying this system is that a lot of the scenarios assume that players will be playing more than one character at a time. It's not the 3 to 5 like funnels usually are, but usually about 2. I have had some players complain that this can feel a bit overwhelming, so if you feel like that's a bit much for your group, I have some solutions. Also, before I cover those, it goes without saying that you can just write your own scenarios with a singular player character per person in mind. It's just that first-party scenarios are not perfectly balanced on purpose, so the extra fodder is recommended. The first solution is, if your group is okay with lots and lots of death, which they should be if they're playing DCC, and you're playing, let's say, a level 2 scenario, just have all players control 1 level 2 each, and if they die a lot, just have new characters take their place as they die. You don't need to think too hard about why they're there. They could be adventurers running up after the party, prisoners in the dungeon, anything. The other solution is to overlevel the characters so that they have a bit more meat on their bones and can hit a bit harder. So for a scenario written for 6 to 9 level 1s, maybe just have your group of 3 or 4 be level 2 or 3. The last solution is to tell your players to pick a main character of their leveled characters. The one that does most of the talking with PCs and NPCs, the one that you focus more on keeping alive, and treating the other one as more of a hireling. This last solution has been my favorite because it allows players who prefer to have more than one character do what they want, and it allows the other players who like focusing on one character do as they please. So, if you're playing at the table with dice, pencils, and paper, you don't need any resources outside of Purple Sorcerer, which I mentioned earlier and I will get to in a second. But stick around for my recommended scenarios at the end of this section. Purple Sorcerer is an invaluable character generator for online or table play. You can choose between level 0 or upper level generators. Just select the options you want and how many, and you can easily print or copy them off. Since all of character creation is random anyway, you're not really missing anything by doing it this way, you're just streamlining the process. This is the method I use for all my games, and it makes the daunting idea of filling out all those sheets much easier. I'll put links to both generators in the description of the video. For online play, you'll need to decide what virtual tabletop program you want to use, if you want to use any at all. In terms of free programs, Astral and Roll20 are options. However, I do not recommend using Roll20 unless you have to. It's outdated and it's so poorly designed, it honestly made me think for the longest time that I just did not like playing tabletop games online at all. I won't go further into it, but if you like Roll20, DCC sheets are supported on it. As for paid options, the big two choices you have are Fantasy Grounds and Foundry. I personally don't have any experience with Fantasy Grounds, as I found it to be a bit too expensive for my tastes, but I hear really good things from my friends who do use it. It also apparently has really good DCC support. As for Foundry, this is my go-to VTT. It's a one-time purchase for the Foundry license and it has a great interface. I'm still trying to learn more about it, as it has a lot of depth, but this is my recommended VTT as it's fairly simple, and if you're someone who likes tinkering, you can do amazing things with Foundry. The biggest drawbacks are, at the time of this video, it's still in development and it's not perfectly optimized, and I have had some players with potato laptops have some issues with running it smoothly. Now, you can use DCC on Foundry without spending any extra money, and you'll have character sheets and everything you need if you want to do some extra legwork, find the modules you need, and all that. However, several months ago, a DCC Foundry compendium was released for 25 USD, and it's an absolute game changer. It has a lot, so I will more than likely do a proper deep dive on it in the future, but it basically adds the entire core book into Foundry and simplifies a lot for you as a game master and player. It adds all the tables to be easily rolled on, enemies as well as their tokens, which you can click on to see their stat blocks, and adds all of the equipment to be easily dragged and dropped into the character sheets. That's just a fraction of the content it adds, but as I said, that will be covered in a separate video once I take the time to learn how to use it more efficiently, because at this current time, I'm still a heathen who uses pencil and paper for initiative in my online games, so I'm definitely not an expert on using it just yet. Now, there are a lot more virtual tabletop programs out there, but I only have experience with the ones listed, so I didn't mention any others. If you have any good VTT suggestions for DCC or other role-playing games, comment below. I'm always looking for programs that make my life easier, and if you have any questions about Foundry or playing DCC online, feel free to ask and I'll be happy to answer any questions. With the resources you'll need covered, let's move on to recommended scenarios. I'm going to try and keep this short and cheap, so I won't be mentioning any box sets here, just good starting scenarios that are guaranteed to be a hit at your gaming table. I will warn here that there may be potential spoilers, so if you're worried about that, just skip to this timecode to skip to the storytime section and conclusion. Be sure to send your game master to this section if they are looking for ideas on what to run. The first recommendation is considered the definitive Dungeon Crawl Classic scenario by many for a reason. Sailors on the Starless Sea is a fantastic scenario that has everything you want out of a classic fantasy adventure. Horror, exploration, traps, disgusting monsters, and tasty, tasty loot. Though it is a funnel, I have run it both as a funnel and a level 1 scenario, and it's been a blast both. I consider playing this module a rite of passage for DCC players. Next, we have Elzamon and the Blood Drinking Box of the Chaos Rising collection. This is a scenario I don't hear many people talk about, but I think it's a really fantastic little scenario with a good length for a one-shot. One issue I have with many one-shot scenarios in both this system and others is that they can stretch just a bit over the 3 to 4 hour length sweet spot for one-shots that I like. I highly recommend the Chaos Rising book as a whole, as it has 7 scenarios from levels 1 to 5 that could honestly be played as a one weird and wacky campaign, plus the book is like $15. It's a great deal. Probably one of my all-time favorite scenarios is from the DCC Lightmar line called Acting Up in Lightmar. In this scenario, the players are tasked as hired muscle for an acting troupe that is currently putting on a show that is insulting a local duke in a hilarious fashion. As the night goes on, more and more problems pop up attempting to derail and stop the show that the players have to deal with. With a proper group of creative players, this can easily be a group favorite, as it is as funny as it is deadly. Also, it's easily convertible to be in a city in your home campaign. It's not dependent on being a Lightmar game. For a bit more of a horror flavor, the DCC horror line funnel Creep Scrag Creep is a fantastic funnel for horror movie fans. The players awaken on the Star of Nostro, alone and confused, while something from the shadows is hunting them. It's a fun, deadly, and weird scenario that the players may not survive. And remember, don't trust the pigs. My last recommendation is a higher level scenario called A Miracle Was Framed. This scenario starts with a very fast-paced fight in the streets and leads the players to a wizard tower to explore. This scenario is also fantastic for mining for ideas in terms of weird shit that a wizard tower would have. Now, this scenario does have some level of intrigue and a bit of a plot twist. I ran as a one-shot, and though my players had a blast, I think the ending was a bit less dramatic than I was hoping for. So I recommend using this scenario as part of a bigger campaign in a city. Maybe drop some rumors or have strange magical events happen around the tower, or maybe even have a miracle hire the PCs earlier on in their adventuring career. Fleshing out the background for this adventure in an organic way would improve it a lot in my opinion. Definitely a fun and bizarre romp through Wizard Tower regardless, however. There are many more scenarios out there that I recommend, but there are too many to cover now, unfortunately. So by now, you should probably already know if this is a game for you or not. As a game master, if you like loosening your grip on the steering wheel and seeing where things go along with your players while still maintaining some modicum of control, then this is the game for you. As a player, if you like frequently having your life on the line, dealing with extremely swinging gameplay where you can possibly kill a demon with a single lucky attack, or fail and turn you and your entire party into goo, then this is a game for you. The chaos isn't constant, but it's always a possibility. DCC has its issues, and it's not a game for everyone, but I don't think anyone can say that it isn't a memorable time, and with a good group of friends, I think you can convert pretty much anybody to join in on the fun. Next, I'm going to recount a few stories from some of my players I have run games for or with, but before that, I'd like to thank anyone for making it this far in the video, and I would love to hear your own stories from DCC or any RPG for that matter. You can easily find me on Twitch, streaming several times a week, usually around 5 Eastern Time, so feel free to pop in and ask me questions there. I also occasionally stream tabletop role-playing games on Twitch, including my DCC series, the Pyrian Anthology, and will eventually post the edited versions on this channel, so be sure to subscribe to catch both those and future videos. Now, on to story time. The party and their 16 hirelings were on their way from the town of Helix to the dangerous but profitable Barrow Maze, an underground mega-dungeon of crypts that spread for miles. Moving slowly through the dark peat swamps and surrounded by fog, the group stayed on high alert, keenly aware of how much noise 22 pairs of boots squelching in the mud made. Suddenly, around them in the fog, about 30 figures could be seen. A group this size out here could only mean trouble. The party halted as the figures drew close. For a moment, there was relief, as these were men and women, not a horde of undead. But as blades were drawn and arrows loosed, the party rallied their hirelings and retaliated. As the two groups met, one of the wizards, sacrificing his flesh to his dark god in the hopes of strengthening a spell, let loose a choking cloud. The wizard must have truly pleased his patron as a torrent of thick, acrid black smoke exhaled from his body and flew towards the enemy. However, the wizard made a fatal mistake in placing the cloud. Though this poisonous cloud was safely away from him and his colleagues, it descended across both their hirelings and enemies. A dozen of the wizard's own men went down instantly, writhing, coughing up blood and black bile. The entire enemy group joined them on the ground in a similar fashion, all save one, who escaped into the fog to tell his masters that they had failed in their attack on the troublesome mercenary band. Though the party had won almost instantly, it had cost a hefty price. A small party consisting of a warrior, a thief, and a wizard were infiltrating a temple dedicated to a rat god to steal an idol from them. They snuck past dozens of cultists, searched through rooms, and took care of guards silently without alerting the temple before making their way down into the catacombs. Once they were in the catacombs, they snuck for a while before running into a ghost of a man with the rats sticking out of his eye sockets and making horrific noises as it rushed towards them down the hallway. The quick-thinking wizard cast Charm Person on the ghost, and with a bit of luck and a bit of rules bending from the GM, the ghost came under her control for 2 weeks. She dubbed him Ghost Buddy, and he helped them in battle against the rat cultists all throughout the catacombs until they reached their goal. Unfortunately, Ghost Buddy was confined to the catacombs, and with a quick but sad goodbye, the wizard left her Ghost Buddy behind as they rushed to escape the accursed temple. Willard, an old merchant and wizard, had crossed the entirety of Pyrian with his young hireling, Case, and his dependable rat familiar Roach. They had escaped thugs in the dangerous streets of Gerlung, survived attacks on the water from both lizard creatures and dark-winged demonic beasts of the night, and even had to deal with a murderous and ambitious academic society in the rich city-state of Valtamiri. Now, Willard found himself trapped in a cramped room inside an underground ancient mansion with his 2 companions while wizards and knights belonging to the academic society of the Rising Sun searched the various rooms outside. Willard had an idea, however. He sent Roach out into the hallway, sneaking past all the enemies who had now found where Willard and Case hid, and were preparing to blast the door down. They didn't count on Willard being able to cast spells through his familiar. Roach reared up, and Willard cast Color Spray after spellburning a good amount. The power that exploded forth from the tiny rat completely vaporized everyone in the room immediately, except for one man who was a little more than a roasted piece of meat that they dealt with promptly. Willard, Case, and Roach, their work done here, moved back up to the surface and rode off back towards civilization.